Life is not simply what happens to us. It is what we choose to make of it. Every morning when we wake up, countless situations compete for our attention. The weather may not be ideal, people may act in ways that irritate us, and challenges may appear out of nowhere that seem far beyond our control. But here lies a truth that separates highly effective minds from reactive ones. Although we cannot always control what happens around us, we can always control how we respond. And it is in that response, repeated moment after moment, that our destiny is quietly shaped. To be proactive is to understand that there is a space between what happens to us and how we choose to react. In that space lies our power. It is in that pause that the mind decides whether to surrender to circumstances or to rise above them. Highly effective people do not hand over this power to moods, conditions, or the behavior of others. They recognize that their thoughts, their actions, and their attitudes are entirely their own, and no one can take that away unless they allow it. Most people spend their lives in reactive mode. If the weather is bright, they feel good. If the weather is gloomy, they feel down. If someone praises them, they glow with confidence. If someone criticizes them, they crumble. Their inner state is like a fragile leaf blown about by the wind, dictated entirely by forces outside themselves. But a proactive mind is different. It is like a tree with deep roots. The storms may come, but the roots hold firm. Instead of saying, "I can't help how I feel, it's because of them," a proactive person says, "I choose my response regardless of them." This simple shift turns life from something that just happens into something deliberately directed. Stephen Covey used the idea of two circles to explain this. The first is the circle of concern, which includes all the things we worry about: politics, the economy, climate change, other people's choices, global events. The second is the circle of influence, which includes the things we can actually do something about: our habits, our words, our commitments, our decisions. Reactive people spend their energy in the circle of concern, worrying, blaming, or criticizing things beyond their control, and as a result their influence grows smaller. Proactive people spend their energy in the circle of influence. They take responsibility for what they can do here and now, and over time their influence expands. A student who chooses to study hard instead of complaining about the system often reaches a place where they can shape the system itself. A professional who sharpens skills instead of blaming market conditions often ends up in a position to change those conditions. The difference lies in where we invest our energy. Being proactive also rests on a profound truth about human beings. Unlike animals that are bound by instinct, we have the freedom to choose. Between stimulus and response, we have self-awareness to reflect on our own thoughts, imagination to envision possibilities, conscience to guide us according to principles, and independent will to act on those principles. When the mind embraces these gifts, it is no longer a servant of conditions, but a master of them. History offers powerful examples of this principle. Viktor Frankl, who endured the horrors of Nazi concentration camps, wrote that while his captors controlled his body, his environment, and his labor, they could never control his attitude. He realized that the last of human freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any given circumstance. That choice sustained his spirit and later inspired millions through his book Man's Search for Meaning. On another scale, Mahatma Gandhi demonstrated the same principle for an entire nation. Faced with oppression, he could have chosen violence or despair, but he chose nonviolent resistance instead. His proactive decision, guided by values rather than impulses, changed the course of history. The beauty of proactivity is that it does not only apply to extraordinary situations. It begins in the small, daily choices. Each time we take ownership of a decision, no matter how minor, we strengthen the habit of responsibility. When we choose to be calm instead of snapping back in anger, when we keep a promise even when it is inconvenient, When we plan our day instead of drifting through it, we are practicing proactivity. These small victories accumulate until they form the foundation of character. There are practical ways to develop this habit. One is to pay attention to our language. Reactive people say, "I can't, I have to," or "they make me so angry." Proactive people reframe this into, "I choose," "I prefer," or "I will." Language shapes thought, and thought shapes destiny. Another way is to focus deliberately on what we can control each day. Instead of pouring energy into distant worries, we act on what is in front of us. When faced with provocation, we pause, we count to 10, breathe, and then decide consciously what kind of response reflects our values rather than our impulses. At the end of the day, we reflect. Did we act proactively or reactively today? Where did we give up control, and how can we reclaim it tomorrow? Proactivity renews the mind because it constantly affirms our freedom. Each proactive choice strengthens resilience in the face of storms, peace in the midst of conflict, and determination to pursue long-term goals despite setbacks. Over time, this creates an inner strength that is unshakable. Life does not become easier, but we become stronger. The truth is that being proactive is not just one habit among many. It is the foundation upon which every other habit of effectiveness is built. Without it, we remain at the mercy of circumstances, blaming luck, fate, or other people. With it, we become creators of our own lives, masters of our choices, and authors of our futures. So as you continue this journey of renewal, remember that your mind is the master. Circumstances will never define you. Your choices will. And in every moment of every day, you hold the power to choose. Most people live their lives moving from one task to another, one demand to the next, without pausing to ask where all this activity is taking them. They react to the urgent without asking about the important. They climb the ladder of success only to discover it was leaning against the wrong wall. That is why beginning with the end in mind is such a powerful habit. It asks us to step back from the noise of everyday life and picture clearly where we want to go before we start the journey. To begin with the end in mind means to live life intentionally. It means to recognize that everything is created twice, first in the mind, as an image or a vision, and only then in reality as a physical creation. Before a house is built, it is designed on paper. Before a journey begins, a destination is chosen. Before a speech is delivered, the words are drafted. The same is true for life itself. If we do not consciously choose the design of our lives, then we drift, and someone else, or worse, chance, will shape our destiny for us. Think about it this way: if you were to attend your own funeral, what would you want people to say about you? What kind of spouse, parent, friend, colleague, or citizen would you want to be remembered as? This is not a morbid exercise, it is a clarifying one. When we imagine the end of our lives, we cut through the clutter and see what really matters. No one on their deathbed wishes they had spent more time scrolling on their phone or attending endless, meaningless meetings. They wish they had loved more deeply, lived more authentically, contributed more generously. To begin with the end in mind is to anchor life around those timeless priorities now, while there is still time. Living this way requires a personal vision, and vision is not vague. It is concrete, specific, and deeply personal. It comes in the form of a personal mission statement, a written or unwritten declaration of what kind of life we want to build. A mission statement is not a slogan to impress others, it is a compass for the soul. It does not describe what we want to have, but who we want to be. It does not only ask about achievements, but about character. Imagine a ship setting out to sea without a destination. The waves and winds will carry it wherever they please. That is how most people live, without a clear destination. They allow the tides of culture, expectation, and habit to steer them. But a captain who begins with the end in mind charts a course, studies the stars, and keeps the wheel steady. Even when storms arise, the ship continues toward its chosen harbor. This habit also shifts our focus from being busy to being effective. Business often disguises itself as progress, but activity without direction is wasted energy. A person may spend years climbing the corporate ladder, working long hours, chasing promotions, and then suddenly realize that what they sacrificed, family, health, inner peace, was far more valuable than the position they attained. Beginning with the end in mind prevents such tragedies. It forces us to ask, is this the right ladder? Is this truly where I want to end up? There is a famous story of a traveler who comes to a fork in the road and asks a passerby, "Which road should I take?" The passerby replies, "That depends. Where do you want to go?" The traveler admits, "I don't really know." The passerby smiles and says, "Then it doesn't matter which road you take. Without a destination, any road will do. But for those who know their end, each decision becomes clearer." In practice, beginning with the end in mind means identifying the roles we play in life and setting goals for each. You might be a parent, a professional, a friend, a community member, a lifelong learner. Each role comes with responsibilities, and each deserves attention. If you envision yourself as a nurturing parent, then you prioritize time with your children, listening to them, guiding them. If you see yourself as a leader in your profession, you dedicate time to developing skills, mentoring others, and contributing to your field. If you value being a loyal friend, you make sure to show up, even when life gets busy. The end in mind acts as a filter. It allows you to say yes to what aligns with your vision and no to what distracts you. This is especially important in a world of constant distractions and endless demands. Without a clear vision, you may find yourself saying yes to everything and ending up exhausted, fragmented, and unfulfilled. With a vision, you can confidently decline what does not serve your purpose, knowing that each no makes space for a more meaningful yes. Stories throughout history show the power of vision. Martin Luther King Jr. did not simply react to the injustices of his time, he began with the end in mind. He envisioned a world where his children would be judged by the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. That vision guided his speeches, his marches, his strategies, and even his willingness to endure hardship. Likewise, great inventors and pioneers always begin with the end in mind. The Wright brothers envisioned human flight long before they succeeded. That vision kept them moving through countless failures. Every breakthrough starts with someone holding a clear picture of the end. For us, the same principle applies in daily life. If you envision health as your end, you eat differently, move differently, rest differently. If you envision financial freedom, you spend and save with discipline. If you envision spiritual growth, you shape your days around reflection and prayer. The end determines the means. Without it, the means scatter in all directions. And here is the deeper truth. Beginning with the end in mind is not about controlling the future, which no one can fully predict. It is about aligning each present moment with the values and principles that matter most. Life may throw surprises, opportunities may shift, plans may change, but if your end is rooted in principles, honesty, integrity, compassion, contribution, then no matter what paths open or close, you walk with direction. In the end, this habit is about living deliberately instead of drifting. It is about asking each day, does this step take me closer to the life I want to be remembered for? Am I living according to what truly matters? Each choice, no matter how small, becomes an act of creation, shaping not only who we are today, but the legacy we leave tomorrow. So do not wait for life to define you. Do not let circumstances, culture, or others write your story. Begin with the end in mind. Picture the life you want to live, the person you want to be, and the legacy you want to leave. Then let that vision guide your steps, moment by moment, choice by choice. Because without vision, we are wanderers, but with vision, we become creators of lives that matter. There is a simple truth that most of us know but rarely live by. Not everything in life carries the same weight. Some things matter deeply, shaping our future, strengthening our relationships, and building our character. Other things demand our attention but add little value, consuming our time and leaving us feeling busy but empty. The third habit, putting first things first, is about learning to distinguish between what is truly important and what is merely urgent. It is about giving priority to the things that matter most, even when the things that matter least are shouting the loudest. Think of your time and energy as a jar, and imagine filling it with rocks, pebbles, and sand. The rocks represent your most important priorities, your values, your health, your family, your long-term goals. The pebbles are the less critical tasks, emails, errands, obligations. The sand is everything trivial, the endless distractions, the mindless scrolling, the things that fill time but don't build a life. If you fill the jar with sand first, there will be no room for rocks. But if you place the rocks first, the pebbles and sand can fit around them. Life works the same way. If we give time to the important things first, the rest can often be managed. If we give time to the trivial first, the important is squeezed out and lost. The danger is that most people confuse urgency with importance. The phone rings and we answer. An email arrives and we reply immediately. Notifications light up our screens and we respond at once. These things feel urgent, but are they important? Will they matter a week from now or a year from now? Often they don't. Meanwhile, the truly important things, nurturing a relationship, working on a meaningful project, developing a skill, caring for health, carry no alarms or deadlines. They can be postponed without immediate consequence, and so they are postponed endlessly until life slips away. Highly effective people resist this trap. They learn to live in what Stephen Covey called quadrant IRE, the realm of the important but not urgent. This is where planning, relationship building, self-renewal, and long-term growth live. It is where the seeds of greatness are planted. It is where the rocks are placed first. A proactive mind does not wait for crises to force attention on what matters. It chooses to give attention now, before the crisis ever arises. Consider how this applies to health. Eating well, exercising, and getting rest are not urgent. No alarm will sound if you skip them today. But they are deeply important. Neglect them long enough, and one day the urgent will arrive in the form of illness or exhaustion. The same is true for relationships. Taking time to listen to your spouse, to be present with your children, to support a friend. These moments are rarely urgent, but neglect them, and urgency will appear later in the form of conflict, distance, or regret. Putting first things first is the habit that prevents crisis by attending to what matters before it breaks. It also demands courage. Saying yes to the important often means saying no to the urgent demands of others. It means having the clarity and confidence to decline invitations, delay responses, or ignore distractions when they do not serve your values. For many people, this is difficult. We fear disappointing others, missing opportunities, or falling behind. But every yes to something unimportant is a no to something that truly matters. Choosing the important is an act of leadership in your own life. Think of figures who lived this principle. Nelson Mandela, during his long imprisonment, could have filled his days with bitterness or distractions. Instead, he invested his time in reflection, study, and preparing for the role he envisioned for himself in a free South Africa. He put first things first. Not the urgent frustrations of the moment, but the important vision of the future. Or consider an everyday example, a student who chooses to study steadily each day instead of cramming the night before an exam. The steady investment in what is important prevents the urgent panic of last-minute preparation. This habit also requires discipline, because our world is full of distractions engineered to steal attention. Social media, entertainment, advertising, All are designed to pull us into urgency, to consume time and energy without giving much back. To put first things first, we must train the mind like a muscle, teaching it to resist distraction and return to what matters. This is not about eliminating pleasure or rest. It is about choosing them deliberately rather than being pulled into them mindlessly. The practical side of this habit begins with identifying your roles and goals. Write down the areas of life that matter most to you: your health, your family, your career, your spiritual life, your growth. Then define what first things look like in each area. It could be exercising 3 times a week, having dinner with your family without phones, setting aside time for learning, or scheduling weekly reflection. Once identified, these things must be scheduled like immovable appointments. Because if you don't schedule your priorities, someone else will schedule them for you. At the same time, practice the art of saying no gracefully. Not every request deserves your yes. Learn to decline without guilt by remembering that every time you say yes to something small, you may be saying no to something great. Protecting your time for what matters is not selfish, it is responsible stewardship of your life. At the heart of putting first things first is integrity. The alignment between what we say is important and how we actually live. Many people say family comes first, but their schedules reveal otherwise. Many say health matters, but their habits tell a different story. Integrity means living in such a way that if someone could see your calendar, they would know your true values without you saying a word. The reward of this habit is peace. Instead of being pulled in every direction by urgency, you begin to live with calm focus. You know that even if the world is noisy, the rocks are in place. The things that truly matter are not being neglected. You may not get everything done, but you get the right things done. And at the end of the day, that is what effectiveness is all about. So as you continue this journey of renewal, remember that life will always present more demands than you can possibly meet. The question is not whether you will be busy, but whether you will be busy with what matters. Will you fill your jar with sand first, or will you put the rocks in place? The choice is yours, and it is made not once but every single day, because in the end, effectiveness is not a matter of chance. It is a matter of priorities. And those who put first things first are the ones who build lives of balance, depth, and lasting impact. To be proactive means stepping out of the mindset that life is something that happens to you and stepping into the mindset that life is something you actively participate in. Think about how often people blame traffic, the economy, their boss, or even their upbringing for where they are. While all those factors may be real and challenging, the choice of how to respond to them always remains in your control. This is the difference between people who merely survive life and those who actually direct it. Instead of waiting for things to improve or for someone else to change, proactive people take the initiative to create solutions, to adapt, and to move forward with purpose. Let's take a very practical example. Imagine 2 employees facing the same tough manager. One constantly complains, feels trapped, and spends energy resenting the situation. The other acknowledges the difficulty, but focuses on what they can control, maybe improving their communication skills, setting boundaries, or looking for growth opportunities in the meantime. Which of the 2 will eventually move ahead? The difference isn't in the manager, it's in the mindset. One is reactive, the other proactive. That single difference reshapes the course of their careers. Now think about your own life. When you face setbacks, whether financial struggles, relationship tensions, or health issues, do you find yourself mostly blaming external forces? Or do you take a moment to ask, what is still in my control? What choice can I make right now that moves me in the right direction? That single question is the seed of proactivity. It redirects your energy away from what you cannot change and focuses it like a laser on what you can. Over time, That habit of redirecting your energy compounds into massive personal growth and resilience. There's also a subtle but profound element here: language. Reactive people often say things like, "There's nothing I can do. That's just the way I am." Or, "If only they would change." These phrases carry the weight of helplessness. Proactive people, however, use different language. "I can find a solution," "I choose to respond differently," or "Here's what I'll try next." By simply changing the words we use, we rewire our thinking. Language shapes thought, thought shapes action, and action shapes destiny. But being proactive is not just about taking action all the time. It's about making thoughtful choices that align with your values. Anyone can react impulsively or try to control everything around them, but that's not proactivity. Proactivity is grounded in self-awareness. It means you pause, evaluate, and then act in a way that reflects who you want to be. It's not about doing more, it's about doing what matters most. One of the most powerful tools in practicing this habit is distinguishing between the circle of concern and the circle of influence. The circle of concern includes everything we worry about: world politics, the weather, global markets, what others think of us. Most of these are beyond our direct control. The circle of influence, however, contains the things we can directly impact: our habits, our attitude, our relationships, our decisions. Proactive people focus their energy within the circle of influence. Reactive people waste their energy in the circle of concern, endlessly worrying about things they cannot change. The more you focus on your circle of influence, the larger it grows. The more you dwell on your circle of concern, the smaller your influence becomes. So, let's ground this with another real-world example. Imagine someone deeply worried about climate change. A reactive mindset might say, "The problem is too big, there's nothing I can do." A proactive mindset, however, looks for personal actions: reducing waste, conserving energy, influencing others through example, supporting initiatives. Alone, those actions won't solve the crisis, but collectively, proactive choices shape movements, and movements shape history. That is the power of proactivity on a larger scale. Being proactive also requires emotional discipline. Think about how many times anger, fear, or frustration has led to decisions that you later regret. Proactive people learn to pause before reacting. They recognize that while emotions are real, they don't have to dictate behavior. That pause, that gap between stimulus and response, is where freedom lies. In that gap, you decide who you want to be. Do you lash out in anger, or do you respond with calm clarity? That choice, repeated again and again, determines not just your relationships, but the trajectory of your entire life. Proactivity is not glamorous. It doesn't always get immediate recognition. It's often quiet, steady, and consistent. But it's also unstoppable. Every proactive decision is like planting a seed. Over time, those seeds grow into trust, resilience, confidence, and opportunity. Eventually, others begin to notice and respect the consistency. Employers trust you more, relationships deepen, and opportunities multiply. Why? Because people gravitate toward those who take ownership of their lives instead of making excuses. The beauty of this habit is that it is not dependent on education, wealth, or status. Anyone can practice it. A student struggling with exams, a parent trying to raise children, a leader running a company, all can choose proactivity. It is universally accessible and universally transformative. So the challenge is this: the next time something frustrates you, instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" shift the question to, "What can I do now?" That single question is the beginning of the most powerful habit you can ever build. It places the steering wheel of life back in your hands. And once you realize you've always had that control, everything begins to change. Imagine being in a conversation where you are just waiting for your turn to speak, not really listening to the other person. You may nod your head. You may even throw in a polite, yes, or I see, but your mind is busy preparing what you will say next. This is what most of us do without even realizing it. We listen not to understand, but to reply. And yet, if you think about the most meaningful connections in your life, the moments that truly stand out are not when someone gave you a clever comeback, but when someone really listened deeply and without judgment. That is the heart of habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. This habit is about flipping the script on how most communication happens. Too often, we try to push our own perspective forward, believing that if only the other person would hear us out, they would see things our way. But communication doesn't work like that. When people don't feel understood, they resist. They close off. They protect their position even more fiercely. On the other hand, when someone feels genuinely understood, when they sense that you've made the effort to enter their world, to feel what they feel, they naturally become more open to hearing you in return. It's almost as if true understanding unlocks a door that persuasion alone can never touch. Think of how often conflicts spiral because neither side feels heard. Arguments in marriages, disagreements between colleagues, even international disputes between nations often come down to the same dynamic. Everyone is shouting, no one is listening. Habit 5 is a call to break that cycle. It's a reminder that understanding is not a passive act but an active, intentional choice. It requires empathy, patience, and the humility to set aside your own agenda long enough to truly grasp someone else's. Listening with empathy means more than hearing words. It means listening with your eyes, your heart, and your full attention. It means noticing the tone, the pauses, the emotions behind the words. For example, if a friend says, "I'm fine," you can often tell from their body language or voice that they are anything but fine. A reactive listener takes those words at face value and moves on. A proactive, empathetic listener leans in and says, "I sense that something might be bothering you. Do you want to talk about it?" That is the difference between surface level hearing and deep understanding. But here's where it becomes even more powerful. Once you make the effort to understand, once you've entered the other person's frame of reference, you earn the right to be understood in return. This is not manipulation, it's mutual respect. People are far more willing to listen to your perspective when they feel you have honored theirs. This is why leaders who practice empathy are more effective, why teachers who understand their students inspire more learning, and why partners who listen with patience build stronger relationships. To live out this habit, you have to train yourself to resist a very common reflex, the urge to give advice right away. Most people don't want quick fixes. They want to feel heard. Picture someone telling you about their struggles at work. If you jump in with, "You should do this," or "Why don't you just quit?" you may think you're helping, but in reality, you're cutting short their process of expressing themselves. Instead, a better response is, "That sounds really tough. Tell me more about what's going on." By creating space for them to share, you not only understand their perspective better, but you also strengthen trust. Now, consider how this plays out in high-stakes situations. Imagine a tense negotiation between two countries. If each side only insists on its demands without first acknowledging the fears and motivations of the other, the conflict will likely harden. But if one side takes the time to truly understand the other's security concerns, history, and cultural sensitivities, a pathway to compromise emerges. That principle, scaled down, applies equally to families, workplaces, and friendships. Understanding is the soil in which cooperation and solutions grow. There is also a personal transformation that happens when you practice this habit consistently. You begin to see people not as obstacles to your goals, but as complex individuals with their own struggles, dreams, and needs. This shift softens judgment and expands compassion. Suddenly, The coworker who always seems irritable becomes less of an enemy and more of a person dealing with unseen pressures. The child who refuses to listen stops being difficult and starts being someone who may simply need more patience and guidance. By seeing the humanity in others, you also deepen your own humanity. It's worth noting that this habit doesn't mean you abandon your own perspective. Seeking first to understand is not about agreeing with everything you hear. It's about acknowledging it. Understanding someone's point of view doesn't mean you accept it as truth, but it does mean you respect it enough to give it space. And in return, your own perspective carries more weight because it's offered from a place of mutual respect rather than competition. On a practical level, you can start practicing this habit today by changing the way you engage in conversations. The next time someone speaks, instead of mentally preparing your reply, challenge yourself to summarize what they've said. Use phrases like, "So what I hear you saying is," or "It sounds like you're feeling." This not only ensures that you've understood correctly, but it also signals to the other person that you are genuinely listening. You'll be surprised at how quickly this simple shift changes the quality of your interactions. Ultimately, Habit 5 is about building bridges rather than walls. It is about recognizing that the path to being heard starts with listening first. In a world that feels increasingly divided, where voices often compete instead of connect, this habit is more than just a tool for personal effectiveness, it is a tool for healing. It reminds us that before we demand to be understood, we owe it to others and to ourselves to extend the gift of understanding. And when we do, communication transforms from a battle of egos into a collaboration of minds and hearts. Think for a moment about the times when you've worked with others and something extraordinary happened. Maybe it was a team project, a group discussion, or even a casual brainstorming session where ideas flowed, energy was high, and the outcome was far better than anything one person could have created alone. That is the essence of Habit 6, synergy. It is not just cooperation, not just compromise, but the magic that happens when different minds and strengths come together to create something greater than the sum of their parts. Synergy begins with the recognition that differences are not threats but opportunities. Too often, we approach differences with suspicion. We see people who think differently as obstacles to our own vision. We categorize them as difficult, misguided, or even wrong. But what if we looked at those same differences as sparks of possibility? What if, instead of resisting them, we embrace them as the raw material for innovation and creativity? This shift in perspective changes everything. Think about nature. In ecosystems, it's diversity that makes them resilient. A forest with only one type of tree is far more vulnerable to disease than a forest filled with a wide range of plants, animals, and organisms. The same principle applies to human relationships and teams. When everyone thinks the same way, solutions are limited. But when people bring different backgrounds, perspectives, and talents, the potential for creative breakthroughs multiplies. Synergy thrives in diversity. Now, this doesn't mean synergy is easy. In fact, it often begins in tension. When people with different ideas come together, disagreements are almost guaranteed. But instead of viewing disagreement as a dead end, synergy views it as the starting point. The clash of perspectives, handled with respect and curiosity, becomes the friction that creates new possibilities. It's not about one person winning and the other losing. It's about staying in the conversation long enough for something better than either original idea to emerge. For example, imagine two colleagues debating how to solve a problem. One wants to move quickly with a bold approach, the other prefers caution and careful analysis. At first, this looks like a stalemate, but if they truly listen to each other, they might arrive at a solution that combines speed with safeguards, something neither would have created on their own. That is synergy in action, a third option that is better than the first two. On a larger scale, synergy is what drives progress in societies. When cultures interact, when disciplines overlap, when different generations share ideas, breakthroughs happen. The most powerful innovations in science, art, and technology often come from the blending of perspectives that seemed unrelated at first. Think about how medicine has been transformed by technology, or how art has been redefined by digital tools. None of this would have happened if people had stayed in their silos, refusing to learn from each other. Synergy also requires humility. It means admitting that you don't have all the answers and being open to learning from others. This can be uncomfortable because our egos want us to believe that our way is the best way. But once you let go of the need to be right all the time, you open yourself up to something far more rewarding: the joy of discovery. Synergy turns conversations into explorations. It shifts the question from whose idea wins to what can we create together. Another powerful aspect of synergy is that it strengthens relationships. When people feel that their contributions are valued, that their uniqueness is not just tolerated but celebrated, trust grows. And with trust comes a willingness to take risks, to share openly, to collaborate without fear of being dismissed. This trust creates an environment where creativity flourishes. In fact, many high-performing teams succeed not just because of individual talent, but because of the culture of trust and synergy they have built. It's also important to understand that synergy is not about compromise. Compromise often means each side gives up something, leading to a result that is acceptable but not inspiring. Synergy, on the other hand, is about creating a result that is exciting, transformative, and truly greater than what either side could have achieved alone. It's not about settling, it's about soaring. Of course, synergy requires effort. It requires patience to listen, courage to share openly, and discipline to keep the focus on creating together rather than competing. But the rewards are immense. Whether it's in families where synergy can heal divides and build unity, or in workplaces where it can fuel innovation, or in communities where it can create solutions to shared challenges, synergy is the key that unlocks extraordinary outcomes. On a personal level, practicing synergy can change the way you see the world. Instead of viewing differences as barriers, you begin to see them as treasures. Instead of fearing conflict, you begin to approach it with curiosity. Instead of clinging to your perspective, you begin to value the mosaic of perspectives that surround you. This not only makes you more effective but also more connected, more compassionate, and more resilient. The beauty of synergy is that it can happen anywhere. In a family deciding how to spend their weekend. In a classroom where students from different backgrounds share ideas. In a workplace where engineers, marketers, and designers brainstorm together. In every case, the principle is the same: when people bring their best selves, listen deeply, and work together with respect, something emerges that is far beyond what anyone could have done alone. So the next time you find yourself in a conversation with someone who disagrees with you, resist the urge to shut them down or defend your position immediately. Instead, lean in, ask questions, explore their perspective. Stay open to the possibility that between your view and theirs lies a third option. One that neither of you could have imagined on your own. That is the power of synergy, and it has the potential not just to make you more effective, but to transform the way you relate to the world. Picture this for a moment. You are driving a car that you never stop to maintain. You never change the oil, never rotate the tires, never refill the fluids. At first, it seems fine, the car runs smoothly, gets you where you need to go, and you don't think twice about it. But over time, small issues begin to appear. The engine becomes louder, the tires wear unevenly, the fuel efficiency drops. Eventually, the car breaks down, not because it wasn't capable of lasting longer, but because you neglected to care for it. This is the perfect metaphor for why habit 7, sharpen the saw, is so essential. It is about renewing yourself, taking time to restore your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being so that you can continue to perform effectively over the long run. Many of us live as if we are too busy to pause. We push ourselves day after day, burning energy, running on fumes, convinced that rest or renewal is a luxury. But the truth is, without renewal, effectiveness decays. You cannot pour from an empty cup, and you cannot keep cutting with a dull saw. Sharpening the saw means investing in yourself so that your work, your relationships, and your contribution to the world remains sustainable and impactful. This habit covers 4 main areas of renewal: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Each one is crucial, and neglecting any of them leaves you unbalanced and vulnerable to burnout. Let's start with the physical. Your body is the instrument through which you experience life. Exercise, nutrition, rest, and stress management are not optional. They are the foundation. Think about it: when you feel sluggish, when your health is suffering, it colors everything else. You're less patient, less creative, less resilient. On the other hand, when you make time for exercise, even something as simple as a walk, you recharge not just your body, but your mind and spirit too. Sharpening the saw physically means treating your body as an asset, not an afterthought. Next comes the mental dimension. Just as the body needs movement, the mind needs stimulation. Too often, people stop learning once they leave school, as if education ends with a diploma. But the mind is like a muscle: use it or lose it. Reading, writing, problem solving, and exposing yourself to new ideas are ways of sharpening the saw mentally. Imagine the difference between someone who continues to learn throughout life versus someone who stopped years ago. One becomes adaptable, innovative, and engaged. The other becomes stagnant and resistant to change. Renewal in the mental dimension ensures that you remain sharp, relevant, and capable of growth. The third area is emotional renewal, which is deeply tied to relationships. Humans are social beings, and our effectiveness depends greatly on the quality of our interactions. Sharpening the saw emotionally means nurturing meaningful connections, practicing empathy, resolving conflicts, and building trust. Think about how draining toxic relationships can be and how uplifting supportive ones are. When you invest in positive relationships, you replenish your emotional reserves. You feel seen, valued, and encouraged, and in turn, you give the same to others. This renewal creates resilience because when challenges come, you have a network of strength to lean on. Finally, there is the spiritual dimension, which is about connecting to your deepest values and purpose. This is not limited to religion. It can be any practice that grounds you in meaning: meditation, reflection, time in nature, prayer, or journaling. Sharpening the saw spiritually means aligning your daily actions with your core principles, ensuring that your life is not just busy but purposeful. Without this dimension, it's easy to drift, to lose sight of what truly matters, and to burn out even if you're achieving outward success. Renewal at the spiritual level gives you clarity, direction, and the inner strength to face life with integrity. What makes Habit 7 so powerful is the balance of these 4 areas. Neglect one, and it undermines the others. For example, you might be mentally sharp but physically exhausted, or spiritually grounded but emotionally isolated. True renewal requires integration. When you sharpen all 4 dimensions, you create a synergy within yourself that multiplies your effectiveness. You become not just more productive, but more fulfilled, more centered, and more capable of sustaining excellence. It's also important to recognize that sharpening the saw is not selfish. It may feel like taking time for yourself means neglecting your responsibilities, but in reality, it's the opposite. The better you care for yourself, the more capable you are of serving others. A parent who takes time to rest and renew is a better parent. A leader who invests in their own growth is a better leader. Renewal is the foundation of contribution. One of the biggest obstacles to this habit is the belief that we simply don't have time. But here's the paradox: by taking time to sharpen the saw, you actually save time in the long run. Just as a sharp saw cuts wood faster than a dull one, a renewed mind and body handle challenges with greater efficiency. You make better decisions, you work with more focus, and you recover from setbacks more quickly. The time you invest in renewal pays back many times over. Practical ways to live this habit are surprisingly simple. Take 30 minutes a day to move your body. Dedicate a few minutes to reading something that expands your mind. Reach out to someone you care about and strengthen that bond. Spend a few quiet moments in reflection or meditation to reconnect with your purpose. Small, consistent actions create a rhythm of renewal that keeps you sharp, balanced, and effective. When you practice habit 7 consistently, you start to notice a profound difference in your outlook. Challenges no longer feel overwhelming because you are recharged. Work feels less like a grind and more like an opportunity to contribute. Relationships deepen because you show up with patience and presence. And most importantly, you live with a sense of wholeness, knowing that you are taking care of the most important tool you will ever have: yourself. So the next time you feel stretched thin, ask yourself, am I trying to cut wood with a dull saw? And then take the time, even a little, to renew. Because the truth is, you are the saw. Your effectiveness, your growth, your impact, everything depends on how sharp you keep yourself. And the choice to sharpen every day belongs entirely to you. When you step back and look at all 7 habits together, what becomes clear is that they are not just a set of techniques for success, but a complete framework for living with purpose, balance, and effectiveness. Each habit builds on the others, creating a flow from personal mastery to strong relationships, and ultimately to renewal that sustains growth over a lifetime. The first 3 habits teach independence. They remind you that you are responsible for your life, that you must know where you are going, and that discipline with your time and priorities determines your future. By being proactive, beginning with the end in mind, and putting first things first, you move from reacting to circumstances to deliberately shaping your own path. You no longer drift, you steer. The next 3 habits focus on interdependence. They show that once you have built personal strength, you are ready to connect with others in ways that create trust, synergy, and mutual benefit. Thinking wind transforms competition into cooperation. Seeking first to understand, then to be understood, deepens communication into true connection. And synergy reminds us that when people come together with respect for their differences, something greater than the sum of the parts is created. These habits turn relationships into engines of growth and innovation rather than sources of conflict. The 7th habit is what keeps the whole system alive. Sharpening the saw ensures that you never stop renewing yourself, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Without this, the other habits wither. With it, you remain sharp, resilient, and capable of living the habits not just once, but every day for a lifetime. Together, the 7 habits are not quick fixes. They are not hacks or shortcuts. They are timeless principles that, when lived, shape you into a person who is not only effective, but also deeply fulfilled. They show you how to build strength within, how to honor and collaborate with others, and how to stay renewed so that your impact endures. In a world full of noise, distraction, and constant change, these habits bring clarity. They remind you that effectiveness is not luck or talent alone. It is the result of consistent choices, aligned with principles that never expire. And when you live them, you not only change your own life, but you ripple outward, influencing families, communities, and organizations for the better. In the end, the 7 habits are not just about doing more, but about becoming more. They are about living deliberately, connecting meaningfully, and sustaining growth in a way that honors both yourself and others. And when you embrace them fully, you find that effectiveness is not a destination, but a way of being, one that can carry you through every season of life with strength, clarity, and purpose.